Story 1. I spent 2 years working for a particular boss, who I'll call Dan. Dan was, and almost certainly still, is the most unacceptable human being I have ever had the displeasure of encountering. He was a compulsive liar, a narcissist, short-tempered, unethical, unreasonable, unintelligent, and abusive. I once witnessed him spend half an hour shouting at a salesman for wearing shoes that Dan didn't approve of. Not inappropriate shoes, mind you, but just ones that Dan didn't like. The salesman in question could have gone home and changed his shoes in the time that Dan spent cursing him out and belittling him. He also sold a client second-hand computers, claiming they were new and priced as new ones. This man not only assaulted me, but verbally and emotionally abused me for the better part of 2 years, and did everything in his power to keep me under his thumb. He constantly micromanaged me, to the point of just dictating to me what I should write in an email to a client. If it wasn't done exactly his way, it wasn't correct. I had to argue with him just to get a goddamn sick day, even though I'm legally entitled to it. I was woefully underpaid, and on call 24/7. This made it difficult for me to find other employment, and is one of the reasons I stayed as long as I did. He made my life absolutely miserable, and I developed a bit of a drinking problem as a result. I recently watched a presentation on domestic violence, and his behavior is a textbook case of what DV abusers do. I could go on and on about the things that this man did to be the biggest asshole he could be, but this is Prorvenge, not Bad Bosses, so I'll get to the story. One day, Dan and I had a disagreement about something. I was right, and I had the emails to prove it, and I was frankly fed up with his bullshit. I told him I wouldn't be going to work because I was taking a sick day. He proceeded to shove me down to the ground. He's a big guy. Probably one of the reasons he's gotten away with being the human garbage he is for so long, and starts trying to strangle me. I was able to fend him off and escape, and after I did, I filed a police report. There were no witnesses, so that was going to go nowhere. He actually had one of his other subordinates make a claim that the alleged assault didn't happen. Said subordinate wasn't there at the time, so false report. I naturally told everyone I knew, and all his clients that contacted me afterward, I was their primary support. So quite a few of them had my personal number that I had filed a police report against him for assault. I specifically said it that way because, unlike simply claiming that he assaulted me, telling people I filed a report was unarguably true and not slanderous. A lot of his clients were already not happy with the services he provided, internet and PBX, so that certainly turned a lot of them off of renewing their contracts. A very close family friend of mine, Carol, was naturally one of the first to hear about the assault. I left the country about a month later in search of better opportunities, but my friend remained, and became the chairman of the board of trustees for the body corporate of the neighborhood where Dan lived. A body corporate is basically like an HOA, but with different laws governing them. She set her sights on making his life hell. Dan had a broken-down car that had been broken down for over a year at that point. He never had the money to fix it, because he's a shitty businessman who never seemed to realize that his business model had really tiny profit margins, and the rules of the neighborhood were changed to force broken-down cars to be towed away. If the owner didn't tow it, the body corporate would, and charge the owner, and fine them. So Dan was fined a few times, not small amounts either, and when he was fined, he did what he always does when things don't go his way: throw a fucking tantrum while having no leg to stand on. The tantrum in this case was several expletive-filled emails to the body corporate, which is just such a great way to endear yourself to someone who already hates you, which got him fined again for breaking the conduct code. This, combined with the loss of revenue for his business, has led to him not having any substantial income for over half a year now. He has no car, nor the money to buy one. Several of his big clients are definitely not going to renew contracts with him, and he appears to no longer have any staff in his employ. Nobody's seen anyone coming to his house in months now, and the body corporate is pressuring his landlord to evict him. He's well and truly fucked. I'm living happily in another country now, and got an awesome job that pays 20 times what working for him did. Yes, really, 20 times more money. That's how little I made under him. TL doctor, boss assaults me, and thanks to a friend of mine, His business failed, and he is on the verge of eviction. Edit. First silver. Thank you, kind mystery donor. Update. I've been informed that Dan was found dead in his home. The police have determined that it was not accidental or natural death, but murder. The rest of the details are still unclear, but I can only presume that he finally picked a fight with someone who could go toe-to-toe with him, and lost. Story 2. Since I was younger, I have always noticed a difference in my father's family's treatment of me. I was the unplanned daughter in the middle of a divorce, while my older brother was expected and looked forward to by the family from an early age. At first I didn't notice this difference, I just thought it was in my head, or that I was exaggerating, so I never paid much attention. For example, at parties, my family only liked me to go when my brother went. On commemorative dates, my brother got video games, remote control cars, or anything he asked for, while I received those little mirrors for $1.99 or a notebook for 5 materials with a random princess. I often cried and felt excluded, but the family said it was drama, and there was no favoritism. The person who affected me the most was my paternal grandmother. Her life revolved around my brother. So let's get straight to the point. What made me realize this? In January 2020, when I was 15 years old, my father came to spend the holidays in Sao Paulo. He is from Minas Gerais, and he came up with the brilliant idea of spending time at my grandparents' farm. I was happy because he loved the farm. We went to my grandparents' house first, so we could go to the farm early the next day. My brother didn't want to go, because according to him, there was going to be an event on Star Tower Defense on Roblox, and he couldn't miss it, so it was just me. When I arrived at her house, instead of greeting me, the first thing she said was, "Where's your brother? Didn't he come?" And I replied that he preferred to play, and she just shrugged and went to greet my father. During the day, she didn't stop commenting on how much she wanted her grandson to be here with her. But I ignored it because it could just be missed, right? We went early the next day. Before arriving at my grandparents' farm, we passed by the neighbor's farm, with whom I had a lot of friendship and affection, as I spent a lot of time with her. But when I looked inside, I saw that she had brought her grandchildren, and they are almost everyone my age. I was excited, and when we arrived at the place and unloaded our suitcase, the first thing I did was greet her grandchildren, who were childhood friends from that place, especially a specific friend. We read and talked about anime and manga. I asked my father if I could play with them, and he agreed. I spent the whole day there playing and having fun. When I returned, my grandmother was quiet, so my aunt came over to talk, saying that my grandmother was sad that I stopped staying with her to spend the day with the neighbor and her grandchildren, since she was my grandmother, and I agreed with her and said that the next day I would spend the day with her and that she shouldn't worry. The next day, while my grandmother was making lunch, I was eating snacks with my cousins and talking to my aunt. My father and grandfather were away, because my father had gotten sick and had food poisoning, so there were only the two of us left. While we were eating, my little cousin asked if he could go play with the neighbor's children, and my grandmother, who was cooking, butted in and said, "No, you can't," and my cousin asked why, receiving the answer, "Don't be disobedient like certain people, and go to other people's houses." I looked at her and said, "Was that a hint?" And she replied, "Yes, it was. If your brother was here, it would be much better. He wouldn't be being as disobedient as you. He could have come instead of you." And I exploded. If he really cared, I wouldn't have preferred to play video games instead of coming to see you. And since I'm disobedient, I'm really going to be. I was going to spend the day with you, but since I'm not welcome, I'm leaving. I got up and ran to the neighbor. I met my friend and started crying. I stayed there until nightfall, and it was time to go home. I had called my mother and told her everything. She was furious and said she was going to talk to my father. But she asked me to go back to my grandparents' place and just ignore my grandmother, since everyone was gone except my grandmother. I did what she said and came back in silence and went to lie down on the bed. When I was lying down, my grandmother sat on the sofa that was in the next room. There were no doors, so I could hear everything that was happening and see it too. She had sat down in front of the TV, and without looking at me, just standing still, she started to say, "Your father called me, and told me that you called your mother. You always do that. You are just like your mother. It's horrible. Your brother should have come instead of you. You're not even your father's daughter." And he continued talking all night. I couldn't hear any more because of the crying, and I slept in tears. The next day when my father was at home, she was acting as if nothing had happened, and came to talk to me normally. But I hadn't forgotten, and since we returned to the house, I didn't say anything to her, and not for a while after, until my birthday arrived in October, and she sent one to me from my brother, asking him to give it to me. When he said she gave me a gift, I gave it back to him and asked to give it back, because I didn't want anything to do with her anymore. He was pissed off and didn't want to talk to me. And my family was upset too and didn't want to know what happened. And I told them what had happened, but they said that my grandmother had already told me everything, saying that I was super rude, and that I had responded to everyone, and that after scolding me I didn't like it and ran to the neighbor after telling my grandfather to go to that place. I cut ties with all of them and told myself that I would no longer accept people who harmed me in my life. But my father thinks I should apologize just to end this shitty atmosphere. Maybe I was the wrong one. Story 3. I was on my way home after a very long day working at the hospital. As much as I would have rather just kept driving, the gas light blazing away on my dash told me to stop being lazy and just fill the tank. After hopping off the highway, I head for the small station I frequently use. It only has 2 pumps both sides, so 4 spots. Even though it has great prices, I rarely have to wait more than a car or two for an open spot. Other than the station, the road is pretty much empty nearby. The station was on my side of the road, so I turned on my right-hand directional. As I began to turn the wheel into the station, this lunatic in a Mercedes, coming from the other direction, sliced through the out lane and inches across my front bumper to beat me into the parking lot. I slammed on my brakes, sending my gym bag and a stack of folders shooting off the passenger seat into a jumbled mess on the floor. I am not a big swearer, but that had me cussing like a sailor. As I pulled in, I noticed a police car in a parking spot outside the building that houses the cashier and the tiny convenience store. My hopes rose as I prayed the officer saw the crazy lady's stunt, and I was about to witness instant karma. No such luck. Sigh. She pulled to one side of the pumps. I pulled to the other. I got out, swiped my card, and started the gas flowing. Then, clear as a bell, I hear the snottiest sounding voice issuing from the Mercedes. This is unbelievable. I was clearly here first, but this idiot is filling up the other car first. No, he hasn't even started me yet. I swear these people are stupid as brick out here. Hold on, Shelley. I have to deal with this moron, or I will be here all day. Now the dreaded "excuse me" is aimed right at me. You know you don't need to wait for the tank to be full before you start another car? Now come here and take this, she said, waggling a credit card at me. If I am late because of you, I will be calling your boss. And just so you know, it is very rude to serve customers out of order. I was here ahead of that guy. I looked down and sure enough she had a New Jersey license plate. In NJ, you don't pump your own gas, an attendant does it for you. My state may have a few full-service stations left, but honestly I haven't seen one in ages. Here you pump for yourself. If she had gotten out of her car, she would have seen I was that guy, but the pump blocked her line of sight. I considered an "I don't work here" lady-style response, but the primped-up entitled expression on this self-absorbed witch required more from me. She stared harder at me, raising her brows, and waggled the card even more emphatically, before I knew what to do. I let go of my pump, stepped closer, and took the card from her manicured fingers. As she sneered at me, I looked her right in the eyes and snapped my hand downward, flinging her card straight into the trash barrel beside the pump. Someone must have thrown a slushie or milkshake in there, because the card made an awesome splat sound when it hit the bottom. The harpy shrill screech that ensued made the thought of sorting out all the files on the floor of my car almost worth it. It could have stopped there, and I would have happily driven away with my half-full tank, but it was not over yet. She was screaming obscenities at me as I turned away, broiling out the Mercedes in her designer outfit, completely losing her mind. That was when the officer came dashing out of the store. "Excuse me, miss, are you all right? What is going on?" "This man assaulted me and stole my card. He threw it in there," she says, stabbing a 3-inch long nail at the barrel. "Is that correct, sir?" "Barely," she insisted, and I mean insisted. I took her card. Since I am under no obligation to provide her service with the card, nor did I want it, I disposed of it in the most expedient manner available to me, I replied, gesturing at the wonderful trash receptacle myself. "That was a pretty petty thing to do. I think you should get it for her," the officer decreed. Karen was beaming with smug malice at that. "I will, under one condition. You detain us both, then go look at the store's parking lot camera. Once you see how we entered the lot, you can decide who goes dumpster diving." He raised a brow at me, but said, "Fine." He takes our licenses and tells us both to wait there. She is a bit perplexed at first, but her natural entitlement must have convinced her she has to be in the right. It is not long before she began to hiss a handful of pretty vile threats at me. I ignored her and finished filling my tank. My passive smiling confidence must have unnerved her eventually. She crept back into the driver's seat and began talking about lawyers with Shelley. About 20 minutes later, the officer returned. He handed me back my license and told me I'm free to go. Before Karen can get a word out, he very sternly rounds on her and says, "Registration, ma'am." That made cleaning up her mess totally worth it. Story 4. Damn, so here's the deal. I've got this sweet little Prius, right? Nothing fancy, just my trusty set of wheels that's taken me places. Now, I ain't rich, and I sure as hell ain't driving some shiny sports car, but my Prius and we got history. Now, cue Karen. She rolls in with this yellow Porsche, acting like she owns the whole damn neighborhood. First day, she's eyeballing my parking spot like it's the last piece of pizza at a party. She starts throwing around some math lingo, saying it's mathematically closer to her place or some nonsense. I'm just like, "Listen, lady, I've been parking here since before you knew what a Prius was. You can park next to me, but this is my turf." Of course, she ain't having it. Every now and then, I catch her trying to sneak her Porsche into my spot when she thinks I'm not looking. It's like a game of parking spot chess, and she's trying to checkmate me. But I ain't one to back down. Now, here's where it gets wild. One day, I decide to take a bus to visit my mom for a couple of days. I leave my Prius in its usual spot, minding its own business. Fast forward 3 days, and I'm back, expecting a warm welcome from my 4-wheeled buddy. But, lo and behold, my heart drops when I see my car looking like it got into a fight with a monster truck. All 4 wheels flat as pancakes, scratches everywhere. It's a damn crime scene, and Karen's peeking out from behind her curtains like she's watching a soap opera. I'm fuming. No way this happened by accident. My first thought is, who the hell did this? And then my eyes lock onto Karen's hideous yellow Porsche. Man, you won't believe the crap I went through with this neighbor from hell. Let me spill the beans on the whole saga. So, there I am, living my best life with my trusty Toyota Prius. Yeah, I know it ain't a Ferrari, but it gets me from A to B without burning a hole in my wallet. I've had that baby for years, and I love it like it's my kid. Park it in the same spot in my compound every single day, right? Life's good. Now enters Karen. Picture this, a woman in her 40s with a yellow Porsche that screams, "I'm compensating for something." First day she moves in, she's eyeing my parking spot like it's the last piece of pizza at a party. She starts spouting some mathematical nonsense about distances from her place, claiming it's her divine right to park there. I tell her, "Listen, lady, I've been parking here since before you knew what a Prius was. You can park next to me, but this is my turf." Of course, she ain't having it. Every now and then, I catch her trying to sneak her Porsche into my spot when she thinks I'm not looking. It's like a game of parking spot chess, and she's trying to checkmate me. But I ain't one to back down. Now, here's where it gets wild. One day, I decide to take a bus to visit my mom for a couple of days. I leave my Prius in its usual spot, minding its own business. Fast forward 3 days, and I'm back, expecting a warm welcome from my four-wheeled buddy. But, lo and behold, my heart drops when I see my car looking like it got into a fight with a monster truck. All four wheels flat as pancakes, scratches everywhere. It's a damn crime scene, and Karen's peeking out from behind her curtains like she's watching a soap opera. I'm fuming. No way this happened by accident. My first thought is, who the hell did this? And then my eyes lock onto Karen's hideous yellow Porsche. I don't waste time. I call up my neighbor, Kelly, who's got security cameras on her property. We huddle around her computer, and there it is, Karen, under the cover of darkness, keying my Prius like it's a scratching post. We've got her red-handed, or should I say, yellow Porsche-handed. I'm furious, but I keep my cool. I call the cops, file a report, and let justice do its thing. But that's not enough for me. I decide to take this entitled Karen to small claims court. It's not about the money. It's about teaching her a lesson. We're in court, and Karen's doing the classic, I'm innocent routine. She's got her lawyer, and I'm standing there with my trusty Prius keychain as my defense. The judge, though, he's not buying her act. We present the evidence, the CCTV footage of Karen's midnight escapade. It's like Judge Judy on steroids. The judge doesn't mess around. He looks at Karen dead in the eyes and says, "Ma'am, you messed with the wrong guy's Prius." Okay, he didn't say it exactly like that, but you get the gist. Long story short, the judge rules in my favor. Karen has to pay up, and I ain't talking pocket change. I calculate the cost of a brand new Prius, and that becomes the magic number. She's got to cough up the dough for a car exactly like mine. I'm feeling vindicated, but Karen's still got that entitled scowl on her face. She writes the check like it's killing her to part with that much money. I take it, and you bet your sweet Prius I cash it. As for my car, it's back in action. New wheels, fresh coat of paint to cover Karen's scratches. It's like my Prius went to the spa and came back looking better than ever. And you know what the best part is? Karen can't even look me in the eye anymore. Every time I see her, she does this awkward shuffle like she's trying to avoid the Prius Avenger. Lesson learned, Karen. You mess with a man's parking spot and his Prius, and you'll pay the price. I might not have a Porsche, but my Prius and we've got something money can't buy: the satisfaction of putting an entitled neighbor in her place. Story 5. I work as an accountant for a software as a service SaaS company, a business known for having some interesting ideas on how things should be run. Yes, I am from Minnesota, in case you were wondering. At the time this issue arose, our company was generating around $30 million in revenue. I was the only one responsible for billing, issuing over 1,000 invoices each month. The majority of these invoices had to be sent by the 5th business day of the month. I had repeatedly requested an assistant specifically for the billing process. Instead, I was provided with someone for collections, a task I had been handling myself with minimal effort, yet still managed a 45-day sales outstanding. Additionally, I received help for revenue posting, which wasn't really my responsibility, and for payroll, a task I had taken on simply because we didn't have anyone else to do it. However, according to the Chief Financial Officer (CFO), there was no budget for an assistant. My supervisor, the controller, consistently tried to secure an assistant for me, but every request she made, along with mine, was denied. Then, one fine day, we introduced a new product, Adobe Sign. This allowed our clients to send documents to their own clients or talent at a significantly high price for tiered bundles. My task was to receive a report detailing how many packages were signed, compare that to what the clients were being billed, and then adjust them to a higher tier if they exceeded their contracted amount for 2 consecutive months. This process worked okay for the first few months when only about 100 clients used the product, and I received a summary report of the usage. But after those initial months, the summary report stopped coming, and the adoption of the product grew exponentially. By April 2020, I was receiving a spreadsheet with 1 million rows, plus 2 supplementary sheets that had 0 key identifiers and no other instructions on how to complete my task. I repeatedly informed my supervisor that this situation wasn't sustainable and that I couldn't figure out how to calculate the tier adjustments. However, she was preoccupied with other matters. Hello, 2020, and simply told me to figure it out. What I figured out was that I desperately needed an assistant. I realized I literally couldn't do my job as it was, so I just didn't. There were 0 tier adjustments from April to October 2020. By October, the sales team, account management, and the executives finally realized that the Adobe revenue was lower than expected based on usage. I reiterated my complaint that I couldn't complete everything with the data provided, Adobe data being the least of the missing and incomplete data, to be fair, particularly when it came to the Adobe tier adjustments. And that's when everything hit the fan. The CFO demanded a full documentation of the billing process because, in his words, finance can't be losing so much revenue. Translation: why were we specifically me messing up? I just smiled, nodded, and agreed to comply with an outside auditor documenting my billing process to find my holes. The documentation process took about 4 months, with 2 weeks of work each month. I detailed my process down to the smallest detail, including the following points. I did not receive a summarized user log. Instead, I received an 18-line user listing that I had to manually comb through for duplicates since 60% of our clients use 2 of our platforms. We didn't and still don't have a single sign-on system, so I had to manually associate each client via a lookup against a non-key identifier manually entered into Salesforce. There was no database for tracking which add-on services our clients were using. Our metadata platform, managed by the client's account managers, was just a manual checkbox for each client and service. The metadata platform had no reporting functionality to audit client usage versus contracted usage versus billed usage. There were other issues, but I think you get the picture. When the outside consultant presented her report to my supervisor and the CFO, the call was quiet for a long time. Then the CFO simply said, "Thank you," and disconnected. About 15 minutes later, I received a direct video call from the CFO. "Melm 2002, he said, "I want to apologize. The fact that company is still a going concern is a testament to your hard work. What you've done with the poor data you've been given is nothing short of amazing. Thank you." That was slightly paraphrased, of course, but that was the general gist. The part about the company still being a going concern. That was a direct quote. The next business day, a job advertisement was placed for an assistant for me and for the Salesforce Deal Desk Manager. I haven't had to answer my phone or dig through customer emails in over 3 years now. I absolutely adore my assistant and am incredibly grateful to have her. She has made my work life a million times better. Story 6. I had made up my mind. It was time to reveal to the world what had transpired with a relentless sociopath who had dared to cross paths with our tight-knit neighborhood. To set the stage, I resided in a sizable, yet not overly expansive city known as Palmville. My home was situated near the corner of a bustling suburb, nestled between crowded apartment buildings, a river emitting a pungent diesel odor during low tide, and 2 busy highways. Being a minority in this neighborhood, I often faced prejudice and animosity due to my ethnicity. However, despite a few clashes between families resulting in physical altercations, enough of our neighbors accepted us, creating a sense of safety when venturing outside our abode. It was an arduous neighborhood, but it was our sanctuary, a place that fiercely protected its own. The community center held a significant role, akin to that of a temple, with Amy serving as the esteemed priestess. In our neighborhood, she commanded immense respect, exuding a calm and empathetic demeanor that mirrored her elevated status. I had never witnessed her deviate from a strong moral code. Now, let me introduce our former landlord, an Asian woman of short stature who embodied the stereotypical traits associated with her ethnicity. Kindness and sweetness radiated from her. Our house exceeded what my parents could afford, and she recognized this. She went above and beyond, helping tenants struggling financially by assigning them repair and maintenance jobs. She compensated them by deducting amounts from their rent, often exceeding the actual value of their work. In hindsight, such practices may have been legally questionable, but they are inconsequential to this story since her death, under suspicious circumstances, does not directly impact the events that follow. Her sons, who had no interest in real estate, assumed control of the business following her passing. Unable to decipher how she had managed to navigate the precarious financial landscape, with numerous accounts steeped in red ink, they decided to unload properties, including ours. I bear no ill will towards them and genuinely wish them success. However, the individual who purchased our house, a sociopath, emerges as a key figure in today's tale. This man wasted no time in turning our lives into a living nightmare. His initial act of cruelty involved a sudden rent increase. Apparently, when the ownership transferred, he gained the authority to adjust the rent to match current market rates. We had been residing there for several years, paying below market prices from the beginning, so this unexpected blow dealt a severe blow to our finances. The second blow came when he declared that rent must be paid in full by the first day of each month, no partial payments, no negotiations for reductions, and no extensions granted. Failure to meet this strict deadline would result in an eviction notice by the second day. Our savings were rapidly depleting, but we managed to scrape by, albeit with great difficulty, for the time being. Meanwhile, Amy had tirelessly campaigned for the city to co-fund a revitalization project aimed at renovating the entire dilapidated suburb, and her efforts paid off. One street at a time, a procession of work trucks filled the neighborhood on a daily basis, addressing various issues like leaky pipes, sinkholes, fences, and rejuvenating paint. It was a remarkable transformation that captivated everyone's attention, including the sociopath. Since our house was located on the outskirts of the neighborhood, it was slated for renovation last, and the sociopath wanted us out so he could relist the property once the renovations were complete. Though he never explicitly stated his intentions, multiple conversations left no doubt, even for my 10-year-old self. He resorted to random inspections, exaggerating minor house problems, and even went as far as attempting to falsely accuse us of animal abuse, because our cat had been attacked, most likely by a raccoon. Absurdly, he tried to claim that we had inflicted the injuries ourselves, as if a veterinarian couldn't differentiate between knife wounds and an animal mauling. We could see the writing on the wall and started making preparations to move. We decided to relocate and live with my eldest brother in a place I'll refer to as Bangeland. Most of us had already moved, except for my other brother who chose to stay behind due to his strong social connections in Palmville, and his new job provided just enough income to meet the sociopath's inflated bills if he cut corners. However, despite his best efforts, my brother came up $20 short one month, and the sociopath seized the opportunity. He gave us a 30-day notice. So, we made the 400-mile trip from Bangeland to Palmville to gather the remainder of our belongings. I couldn't say I approved of my brother's living conditions, but that's inconsequential to the story. The month passed without any major incidents, as if the sociopath believed he had already emerged victorious and had no need to waste fuel on gloating visits. Word had spread throughout the neighborhood about what was transpiring, and for the first time ever, upon my return, I encountered no confrontations, no hostile glares, no racist remarks. Everyone conducted themselves with a solemn demeanor, which, to be honest, felt somewhat eerie. I suppose those in lower income brackets were all too familiar with the looming threat of eviction and recognized that I was already going through a difficult time. 20 days later, the sociopath declared it was time for us to leave. Although we still had a week remaining, we lacked the funds to mount a legal fight. Amy, like a guardian angel, intervened and managed to secure us a couple of extra days. Nevertheless, it was evident that the sociopath was determined to drive us out, perhaps because the work trucks were now just one street away from our house. The last glimpse I caught of the home I had grown up in was witnessing workers carelessly tossing my childhood possessions into a large bin, even though we technically had 3 more days before we had to vacate. What follows is a collection of information I acquired through grapevine conversations and phone calls with individuals present during the events. Without delay, the sociopath promptly moved into the house himself. Wondering why? Well, here's the answer. Those who owned their homes were entitled to receive full cost coverage for renovations, as determined by the city. The sociopath cunningly realized that by residing in the house, which he had purchased at a bargain during liquidation, he could have it renovated for free and subsequently flip it for a profit. However, Amy was not one to be trifled with. She made it abundantly clear to him that when the revival project was approved, the house had been classified as a rental property, and the budget couldn't be altered now. Furthermore, she clarified that the partial cost coverage approved for the property was in our name, not his, rendering him ineligible for any financial compensation. He would have to foot the entire bill himself. Since the entire neighborhood was undergoing a transformation, he was required to renovate the exterior at the very least. Failure to comply would result in the house being condemned due to its unsightly appearance or deteriorating condition, whatever the appropriate legal term may be. In a bid to save money, he cut corners during the renovations, opting for new carpets and a fresh coat of paint, a decision that would later come back to haunt him. Undeterred, he proceeded to earnestly try to sell the house. However, the neighborhood hadn't forgotten his actions. Instances of vandalism occurred when the property was unoccupied, while neighboring residents made sure to create disruptive noise during house viewings. Additionally, whenever potential buyers sought opinions from the community, they were met with disdainful glares and unwelcoming responses. The neighborhood made it virtually impossible for him to sell the house at its market value. After enduring 3 months of these tactics, the sociopath reluctantly lowered the listing price. A month later, he made another reduction, finally attracting a potential buyer. Amy, taking matters into her own hands, made sure that every single piece of paperwork was meticulously filed before the property changed hands. Furthermore, the entire house underwent thorough inspections. And that's when karma itself caught up with him. Due to his rushed and shoddy renovations, the pipes had somehow sustained damage, resulting in the emergence of insidious black mold. Amy, bearing in mind his past treatment of us, decided to exact her revenge. I never learned the exact details of her scheme, but she managed to delay the sociopath's receipt of the news about the black mold discovery for several days. By the time he finally learned of the situation, there wasn't enough time left to arrange for cleaning or make any last-ditch efforts to salvage the house. Within days, the house was condemned. In a final act of retribution, Amy and members of the neighborhood filed numerous complaints and injunctions, compelling the city to order the sociopath to demolish the house immediately. He was forced to bear the cost out of his own pocket. He had attempted to ruin a family and had violated laws all for the sake of quick cash. Instead, he found himself entangled in a year-long legal battle and incurred significant financial losses. The neighborhood remembers. The neighborhood enforces justice.